man, welcome back to the PKF. I'm your host Preston. Today we have the 2022 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 392 modified by American Expedition Vehicles. This is the JL370 package. In today's video we're going to be taking it for the first time on the channel. We're going to do a walk around and talk about some of the main features of the vehicle. Alright, so I'm here with another guest on the channel. This is Avery. He's been on the channel before. My brother, and I like to refer to him as the resident AEV expert, so he's going to talk about some of the features and options of this Jeep.
So I suppose the first thing that's worth mentioning is that this is a pretty low option 392 from factory, not counting the AEV extras. The first thing that we did is we went with the new silver Zenith paint color. We think it actually looks pretty nice. It's more of a gloss silver, unlike Billet, which is a little bit darker and has some metallic flake. I think we like the contrast with the black pack and the bronze that comes factory, so we emphasize that a little bit. I'll talk more about that sort of color later on, but to start, the only other option we went with from factory was the front trail cam, which we thought was an awesome feature to have from factory. We really like the rear camera, and now parking this thing is just even easier, and AEV makes it nice and easy to relocate that camera so that it's not blocked by this brush guard here and the additional lights. We'll do a shot of what that camera looks like and how nice it is coming out. But beyond that, we initially didn't go with the black grille because we weren't sure if we would like it with the silver color or not, and once it arrived at AEV, we said, all right, you guys can go ahead and paint it black because we think it's going to look a bit more menacing, and we think the turnout was fantastic. So when one approaches AEV for a prospective purchase, whether it's either going to be a turnkey vehicle that you do through a dealership or if you want to send it there yourself, there are a couple packages that come standard in order to get the full sort of AEV branding and their own VIN number, so to speak. And what we chose was the JL370 package. So that means that it's coming with a 2.5-inch lift over stock, 37-inch tires, mud terrains or all-terrains. We chose all-terrains for the ride. You got a front bumper, rear bumper, these lights on the front here, worn winch of your choice. Actually, I'm sorry, the worn winch isn't included, but there are two options, and we went for the lesser of the two just because we don't really envision us using it all too much, but it's always good to have in case we want to take it off-road. There's a shot of that there with the Fairlead. And you also can option the skid plate and light bar underneath. And this is the rear bumper that's included with AEV. We also did the optional splash guards and reverse work light. The AEV tire carrier comes with the rear bumper and is integrated into the frame rather than into the door, so it pulls some of that weight away. And we also decided to option the fuel caddy, which I believe it's 10.2 gallons of fuel, so that's nice if you're out on a trail and you're sort of in an emergency, especially with a gas guzzler such as the 392.
You can see too that one of the biggest benefits from AEV, and I've talked about this in the last AEV video that we did with the Sand Glow Jeep, is that everything looks basically OE+. So as Avery said, you can see how the rear tubular bumper here is really integrated into the frame of the stock Jeep. So this is where the stock Jeep ends here with the fender flare. And you can see that bumper is basically cut right up into that flare. So you have very little panel gap width. Everything is measured basically exactly how you want it. And obviously that continues in continuity with the front bumper too. You can see this is a full boron steel front bumper. You can go check out Dave Harrington's video on YouTube. I think it was a podcast that he did, right, where we talked about that.
There's a podcast on it.
But it's a very special process of molding steel, and it creates this super hard, rigid material.
So beyond some of the base offerings, we chose to forego the sort of stubby bumper, which is called the RX front bumper from AEV, and went with the EX because, like Preston was saying, we like the integration. We like that the wheel well is completely blocked and we have a bunch of air running underneath there. And we decided to do some personal touches by really emphasizing that sort of bronze theme that comes from factory. So we went with the AEV Bora wheel, and one of the options when you're ordering from AEV as a turnkey build is they can do custom paint for any color that you wish, and it's actually a fairly good deal when you think about it. It's basically paint to sample for $500 some. So they were able to match nicely to this bronze that AEV obviously has been using on the 392, both on the Rubicon badge and the 392 badge on the hood here. And AEV was kind enough for the 392 to change their proven worldwide and standard sort of bison badge here to have the text in bronze rather than the typical red or orange, so that the theme is carried around throughout the whole vehicle. Additionally, the biggest thing that we've seen as a positive on this vehicle over our previous AEV builds is the upgraded 8100 reservoir shock. So it's kind of hard to explain, but when you have the regular shock, it's, especially in Michigan with the roads as bad as they are, the bumps are almost like super sharp, and you can feel them throughout the cabin. They're super loud. And now these 8100 shocks, where we have dual both front and rears, have just been fantastic, and it's really softened the ride. It's almost similar to a TRX if you've driven one. Preston had one at
Basically,
the same time.
It's an additional helper spring, so it's a lot more comfortable just on road, and I think it pairs well with the 470 horsepower too.
And as we were saying with the bronze theme, this is factory from Jeep. They stitched the bronze Rubicon 392, and AEV goes ahead and matches that stitching and adds their logo up top, and they did a fantastic job matching it. And we also carried the wheel color into the dash, which we think is super nice. No more from factory. This comes in sort of a gray that has a metallic flake, and that metallic flake can almost be seen in the bronze too on a sunnier day. I think they did a super good job, and it kind of just helps remind you that you're in a pretty special vehicle.
So one of the other cool features worth mentioning that we talked about earlier in the introduction is the trail camera. So you can go on your apps here. Here's your front-facing camera. It's pretty cool. You can clean both the front and the back. Here's the rear camera. I'll show you sort of the watch feature. It's pretty cool. You can see it's pretty neat. Finally getting the 392 JL370 AEV out on the road, some of the initial driving impressions. First of all, I think in sort of the introduction and tour around the vehicle, Avery talked about the 8100 helper shock, and that is really sort of the first thing that comes to mind when I step into this 392 AEV over the Sand Glow Jeep that we had, is that the riding and driving impressions and the way that it holds itself and on-road dynamics is just much better, isn't it? I mean, it feels, I would say, closer to a Range Rover than it actually does a Jeep Wrangler, wouldn't you? With the AEV suspension system on here and the helper shock.
It certainly helps. Yeah, it's one of those things where we were checking the box and we were saying, well, we might as well do it because the ride was pretty harsh, but we didn't really have huge expectations, because at the end of the day, this is supposed to maintain fantastic off-road performance and not just be a on-road vehicle. But when we first picked it up and got in, it was honestly night and day, and it's well worth, I think, the $1,800 option that it was. It's just turned it into a completely different vehicle that we'd be happy to take with on a road trip even, whereas the other Wrangler was sort of fun around town, but it sort of felt like a chore as soon as you got onto the freeway or went anywhere above 60 miles per hour.
Obviously, I'm driving this AEV 392 on road, but I think that that's one of the best things about this Jeep is it's not necessarily just an off-road tool, much like a lot of the built-up package Jeeps. I spoke about this in the build video in a little bit when I was doing the video on the Sand Glow Jeep that we had, and AEV's founder Dave Harrington really emphasizes the dual-purpose use of these turnkey package vehicles, and I think that that's really what sort of allows AEV to stand out in the market as opposed to a lot of, well, you can't even really call them competitors, can you? I mean, what would you consider as comparable to this?
There are not many manufacturers that work hand in hand with OE and then take the skills and things that they've learned from there and then go and integrate them into a complete package. Most companies just make parts and they don't really think about how everything's going to integrate together into a full kit, which is why, like, this package almost seems synonymous with like getting a carbon fiber track pack on the Mustang. It's like if Jeep were to put Overland package and you check the box on there, and you know, I mean, it was about $17,000 starting price before some other extra options, but to me that seems like a fairly reasonable price to just be able to just get in the car, drive, and not have to worry about purchasing two different vehicles for different occasions.
Right, and the package is warranted. It does not void the stock warranty of the Jeep, right? It's basically sort of the Brabus, I guess you would call it.
I think the only thing that isn't covered as well as the factory is the fact that it's upgraded to the 4.56 gears, which I think AEV has a year or two warranty on it, whereas if it was from factory, it would be for that full 4 or 5 years. But I don't know, maybe you could get the Extreme Recon and take it there, but we think that sort of doesn't make so much sense because you're paying $4,000 to pull off the wheels and tires.
Yep.
And basically you're left with the trim pieces on the fenders because the hinge gate reinforcement doesn't even fit, so they have to get rid of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of mentioned, I think on road, I think that this Jeep drives a lot better than stock. And I think that is a result of all of the R&D that went into this. It is OE quality. You can check out AEV's other vehicles that they produce packages for, and one of them is the Colorado Bison, which was produced for GM, and they went through crash testing, you know, looked at tons of different variables, wind tunnels, etc. And a lot of that R&D learned from working with that OE specifically and with Jeep over the years translates into the packages that they have on their Wranglers, and it really comes forth in the driving dynamics. I mean, you can see right now I'm going about 50 miles an hour. It's been 4 years since the last JL that we had between that vehicle and this vehicle, when that vehicle was built versus this. You can see it's just straight as an arrow down the road. It feels really good. I have the exhaust button off right now. It's a pretty nice, peaceful place to be, which is not something you'd be used to seeing in a Wrangler.
And one thing that's been significant for us is we are actually getting better gas mileage in the 392 with the AEV package than we were with a standard V6. And we are also getting the same, if not better, gas mileage than from factory. I have the handy window sticker here, which says we should be getting 14 combined, 13 city and 17 highway. And right now
we're at 14.2.
14.2.
And that was, you know, that of course included a few situations where you hammer it and you're acting like a fool. So all in all, it's pretty good. As I said, I have the exhaust button off right now. You can see the difference if it's on. I don't know if this comes through for the camera, but you can really hear that burble. And that's one thing, is this thing just sounds absolutely awesome. It's powered by the 6.4 liter V8 that you get in a lot of the SRT products. It has 470 horsepower, 470 pound-foot of torque. But I would say, you know, a lot of people get caught up in the horsepower number. I would say that the torque number is almost just as important.
Oh yeah, especially right off the line. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of times you're doing a full drag or top speed run with this, and it's funny to surprise some people at red lights.
Yeah, the 470 pound-foot of torque, 470 horsepower, combined with the ZF8 speed that's in this, that I think in every single video that I've talked about how much I like the ZF8 speed. It was in my TRX, it was in the Range Rover SVR, it was in the Jaguar SVR. And combined with that gear ratio, this thing cruises down the freeway.
We got the full-time all-wheel drive.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it cruises down the freeway. I think at 80 plus miles an hour, you're only at around 2,100 RPM. And it's kind of a stark contrast between that and the Firecracker Red 6.4 AEV that we had. That was a JK Jeep build. Let's just hear it for a minute. Get in a lot of trouble with this. I mean, and it looks like a refrigerator, but I'll tell you what, it really goes. It's actually insane. The one thing that, of course, sort of continues in spirit with the last AEV we had, the sand glow, is just the vagueness of the steering, which you notice right away. It's very light. You don't get very much feedback, but it's not, I wouldn't necessarily say it's guesswork where you're going to be when you're going around a corner, but it's pretty close. But it feels good. It's it's great for daily driving and it's good for off-roading slowly, but I mean it's not obviously ideal for going very quick around corners. The off-road plus mode is something that obviously you have to mention too. I don't think that really changes the steering very much necessarily, but
it sharpens the shift points a little bit.
A lot of people don't know about this though, but the off-road plus mode in the 392, and I think you ran into it at Jeep Engineer the other day, and you sort of spoke with him about this, or maybe
he talked about the torque launch too, and I think
there was he called it an Easter egg.
Yeah, I think the off-road plus is synonymous with sport mode in other vehicles, but I think probably for legal reasons they cannot put sport mode on this with the way that it cannot.
They don't want the high schooler going to prom, taking Daddy's 392 out and flipping it with his date in the car. Right.
Most sport modes on other vehicles, I mean, it'll pull the traction control off, which it does in this, and it'll sharpen the shift points and just make it rev a little higher.
Yeah,
and that's what this does.
It really crackles too when it's in the off-road plus, which is, it doesn't really have an extra baffle or anything too, but I think it's probably just the way that it keeps the RPMs up. But it sounds absolutely amazing. It never gets old. And again, when you turn off the exhaust, it could be pretty much a 3 Series BMW, right? Almost. Besides the wind noise that you have with the
the wind noise.
A little bit of lack of sound deadening, but that's just typical Jeep Wrangler. But the road noise from the tires is also not very bad, considering we went the all-terrains on this, as Avery mentioned. And I think it's a much better choice if you're actually going to be using this, driving to work and so on. I don't think that everybody's necessarily in their course of employment rock crawling every day, right? No. You got to have something that's usable. You got to have something that if you do want to take that 500-mile journey, that you're not being bounced around and you're not getting earaches. So I think it's smart to really think about how you're going to use the Jeep, and that's what we did when we put the build together. So now let's talk about a little bit about the pricing and value of the 392 Rubicon. I guess we can do that standalone and then talk about the actual AEV packages that add on to it. So the base vehicle price, I believe, was around what, 79.5 out the door.
79, 780, because we put a few options, and at the time we ordered it, I think it was about 2,500 less. Because over the time it took to build, it was the MSRP was raised twice, but luckily across Jeep and Kentucky, they price protected us both times, which is nice. Just
like everything. Yep, everything's going up. I think my TRX went up $4,000 after, from when I ordered it to when I got delivered. I was price locked with that as well, but not to go off on a tangent. I think that, when this thing was first launched, people said $80,000 for a Jeep Wrangler. It's pretty insane, right? But I think when you consider what you're getting as a package, I'm trying to think of really the alternatives. I mean, you have a 6.4-liter naturally aspirated V8, as I said, all-wheel drive SUV, tons of capability. I would say that this is a pretty practical vehicle too. A lot of people, might sort of turn their head away at the gas mileage and so on, but I guess if you could sort of look away from that, I think this is a pretty usable vehicle day to day. I mean, the back seat space, I guess, is a little bit limited. If you have, I don't think you're going to be very comfortable as a 6'5" adult in the back seat, but it's perfect for kids. I think it's comfortable enough now. I think stock as the 392, I haven't driven a stock 392, but from what I've heard, the suspension setup in the stock 392 is a lot more compliant. But I truly do think that this AEV suspension system with the helper shock really improves the day-to-day livability of the Jeep Wrangler. So getting on to, there's an Urus down there.
Yeah, it's a distraction.
that was a distraction from the video, but I think this package that we got from AEV with all these options, the bronze accents, everything included. I'm just trying to think of everything. There was so much. The winch,
we'll throw a screenshot of the window sticker up just so we don't go and list through things for 2 minutes. But
the Baja light, the rear caddy, the fuel caddy, etc. I think it was just around what, 24,000 the package.
Yeah, let me
through
see.
AEV. So I think this Jeep out the door is about $104,000, which is of course a lot of money.
But through our AEV pricing also went up while we were getting built, and we were price protected on both ends. So I think all in all, we are probably actually sitting right at like 100 and change. But if you were to build and spec it now, it would be 104 high, 105.
Right. Right. I mean, what do you have comparable in the market? I'm just trying to think. You can't really say something like an X5M or a Range Rover SVR is in this category. The only other vehicle that I can honestly think of off the top of my head that sort of has that military utility feel combined with the luxury, you know what it's going to be? What is it?
G63.
Mercedes G63. And the G550, of course, with the non-AMG version. But even for the G550, you're in the mid 130s to 140 now. I think that those have increased. The G63 starts at 160. That's before you put any option on it with putting any of the cool wheels, night package,
if you
can
order one,
right? And of course,
and if they charge MSRP,
right? And that's the big asterisk: is if you can order one, you're not going to get a slot for one of those. If you do, the dealer will probably screw you over and try. They're going to throw a $50,000 ADM on you at least. I know that there was actually a guy who filed a lawsuit here in Michigan. I won't name the dealer because I wasn't involved, obviously, but I think it was a lawsuit the other day right about his G63 that came in after 2 years, and they said, sir, it's actually going to be $300,000+ for your G63. And I think the spec on it was $180. So good luck with that. So what is the solution? Order an AEV 392 Jeep, right?
And the value retention's great on these. We just saw one that sold above $130,000 and basically the same spec because a California dealer marked one up and it sold, I think, under 48 hours.
Right, and I guess I should say I don't want to be misleading with this either. These are not really that easy to get either, the stock 392. Luckily, I work with Cross Jeep. Joel there is absolutely awesome. If you're interested in getting a 392, I recommend giving him a shout. Cross Jeep is absolutely fantastic, and we've worked with them in all of our Jeeps, including the family Grand Cherokee that we have now. And they're a no-nonsense, no BS dealer. They don't even mention the word markup to you. In fact, I think he actually gave me he gave me under MSRP a tiny bit on this.
Slightly.
And this is in the environment where you basically cannot get anything. So they're just absolutely awesome. They gave us a very fair number on the trade for the Sanglo Jeep. So all in all, they're just a great bunch to work with, and they worked hand in hand with us on this build. All right, summing up the Jeep Wrangler, I keep calling it a different name every single time. Summing up the JL370 Rubicon 392, I guess we can just go through some of the likes and dislikes, starting with the dislikes. There really aren't any dislikes. I guess, and you say whether you agree, I guess the slight dislike would be the lack of steering feel. That kind of comes with the territory with the Wrangler, as I mentioned, and perhaps the gas mileage, but you can't really complain about that because you know what you're getting. 470 horsepower V8 comes with the territory. Gas prices are expensive, but that's not anything that the Jeep can control, so I don't want to hurt its feelings, but I mean the likes. Obviously, this AEV package is just outstanding. It just adds even more capability to an already amazing machine, the Rubicon 392. The on-road dynamics are fantastic. It is night and day compared to all the other Jeeps that I've owned. I know that off-road it would just be just as capable. We need to finally get this thing up north at the dunes, off-road, do some proper mudding in it. I know it'll perform just as well, probably. Right, of course. It's absolutely a fantastic vehicle. I mean, the fact that you have something that you can take to the grocery store, you could pile the family, and you could go on a trip with this and I think be a lot more comfortable than you would prior in any other Jeep that we've owned. Take it to the trails, get it muddy, get it dirty. You don't have 22-inch wheels to worry about scratching. And at the same time of doing all these things, you can go 0 to 60 in right around 4 seconds. I mean, it's the overall package. I think the value is great. They hold their value. You don't really have to worry about residuals when you want to get out of it. It's just a great overall package, in my opinion. I mean, how do you like it? What are your sort of likes and dislikes and takeaways of the vehicle so far?
Well, yeah, dislikes, like you said. I mean, it would be nice to have a bit better steering, but I think it kind of keeps you in check not to go too crazy with the thing. If the steering were a bit tighter, you'd probably be a bit hairy on the freeway and other situations. But I don't know, maybe improve some sound deadening a little bit on the headliner, but that's also another thing where if you want to have the removable top, you need to sacrifice a little bit. So when you're getting into a Jeep, you can sort of expect these things. So I don't know if it's fair to call them dislikes when they have so many positives that come along with them. But yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest likes are the suspension that we touched on, just how it turns it more from an off-road vehicle into like an SUV and an enjoyable drive, a comfortable drive, especially on the Michigan roads. The sound, of course, just fantastic. I think Jeep just nailed it. I'm surprised it sounds this good from stock, and I also think it's quite hilarious that there's no stop start and that was replaced with the exhaust buttons. It's also a pretty smart vehicle in terms of the way they did the electronics. So if you stop the car and with the exhaust on, it'll remember and it'll do that. That's just, you know, a pet peeve of mine in previous cars we've had, like the Range Rover.
Yeah,
it'll start
really
with the exhaust closed and you have to click that. I mean, it sounds kind of stupid saying it, but every single time you get in the car, you have to press stop, start, off, exhaust on, and it just becomes just a little, it becomes extra buttons that you have to do every time you're starting the vehicle.
It's very well thought out, the package, and I mean, there's touch points and things like that obviously aren't to the level of something like the G63.
But I think that's what's keeping the price that big of a difference.
It's more obtainable. That's going to do it for us on the AEV JL370 Rubicon 392. This is Preston and Avery. You're watching the PCAF. Thanks a lot for tuning in. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the next one.